Hello again. August has been quite a crazy month for me, but I'm finally back, and I've got a special To Be Honest video today. But before I continue, I'd like to apologize in advance for both my voice and the quality of this video. I've been sick since Monday, and I am, if you could tell, incredibly tired. So I'm going to be voicing this video in one take. Today, I'll be covering the origin of video game creator Yoko Taro's universe, Drakengard, or, as it's known in Japan, Dragoon. Now, I originally wanted this to be the very first To Be Honest video, but once I put in the initial research, I knew I had to wait for this one. And that is because on September 11th of this year, Drakengard will be celebrating its 20th anniversary. And of course, for obvious reasons, this video is releasing today, September 10th. I've waited a long time to cover this franchise, so without any further delay, to be honest, is Drakengard worth playing today? Originally, Drakengard first released in Japan on September 11th, 2003, later releasing in North America on March 2nd, 2004, and a PAL version on May 21st. Commercially, the game was a success, selling a combined total of 440,931 copies, over 240,000 of which were from Japan. So how did this success come to be? Well, the game was initially concepted by Enix producer Takamasa Shiba and Ace Combat 3's director Takuya Iwasaki in 1999, and codenamed it Project Dragonsphere. Drakengard was originally going to be an aerial combat game with dragons, but after the large success of Dynasty Warriors 2, Shiba wanted to include ground battles as well as aerial combat. This caused a lot of setbacks since the game was initially designed for aerial levels, and they had to work out a good balance between the two. How the story of Drakengard came to be is actually quite interesting. Both Iwasaki and Shiba had no experience with creative writing, and Yoko Taro, who had joined the project as an art director, was switched to literal director since his artwork wasn't impressing them. Not only that, but he was also assigned to work alongside Sawako Natori on the script. Before I go any further, I wanted to give a shout out to Sawako Natori and give credit where credit is due. After quitting in 2001, she became a freelance writer and went under the pen name Nazuna Natori. She is responsible for writing the main scenario for Drakengard 1, 2, 3, and Near Gestalt/Replicant. Natori has also worked on Tales of Destiny and Tales of Eternia. Without Sawako Natori, who knows if Drakengard would become the success it is today. Going back to how the story came to be, Yoko Taro wanted to stand out against Square Enix's big franchises, Final Fantasy, Dragon Quest, etc. Yoko Taro, however, did a little more than stand out. He took the word dark and stretched it to its absolute limit. Not only was he inspired by the 1995 anime, Neon Genesis Evangelion, but he also included themes such as incest, cannibalism, pedophilia, genocide, and more. This being something that wasn't really ever done before, he was worried about the dark tone and consulted with Square Enix producer Yosuke Saito, who was responsible for pitching the game to Sony in LA during an E3 event. Fate, however, was on their side as the Sony staff were so exhausted from pitches, they approved the game without reviewing it, and thus Drakengard was given life. The story doesn't end there, though. As the game was being developed, an advisory board from Square Enix had repeatedly asked to change the game's content, presumably wanting a much lighter tone. Saito, thankfully, refused most of their requests, but for those who don't know, the game was censored for Western audiences, mainly toning down the references to taboo and incest and etc. During development, they were told there was not going to be a sequel. Yoko Taro then decided to make the game have multiple endings, 5 in total. The 5th ending, or rather, the most infamous ending, was made by him and a small group of developers as a practical joke and an homage to the end of Evangelion. It was first conceived as a singing competition against a giant version of the pop singer Ayumi Hamasaki, but that version was immediately rejected. After making an improved version of the ending, he finally showed the rest of the team right toward the end of development. Takamasa Shiba was not happy about this, and from what I understand, did not want it included, but Takuya Iwasaki pushed for it. Now, Drakengard is mainly remembered for having that incredibly bizarre ending that led to the creation of Neo. However, at the time, Drakengard's development was so stress-inducing that Yoko Taro swore off working on a sequel if it ever came to pass. And to that point, he kept his word. When the sequel was confirmed, he chose not to work on it. But thankfully, he later returned back to writing with Neo, and that is how Drakengard was made. Now normally, this would be the part where I talk about the story, but in this case, I think the less said is better. Not to imply that the story is bad, on the contrary, the story is excellent. However, I believe in this case, it would be better to experience the story by yourself. So let's talk about the gameplay. Gameplay can be divided into 3 sections: ground battles, strafe levels, and aerial battles. First up is ground battles. These play similarly to Dynasty Warriors 2, only a lot better. Like Dynasty Warriors, however, you are placed in this large, open sandbox that is quite honestly filled with nothing but enemies. The biggest difference between the two is that Drakengard's levels have more detail and atmosphere. Gameplay is more or less the same as Dynasty Warriors, though. You run through the sandbox, killing hundreds of the same looking enemies with the occasional outlier popping up. During gameplay, you can switch to a menu where you can equip a different weapon that either suits your playstyle or the situation. You can also use magic that ultimately depends both on what weapon is equipped and how many charges you have. For instance, having 1 green charge will let loose some fire, while having all of the bars charged will unleash an explosion. You also have a partner that you can switch between when you are in a pinch. Personally, I always chose the character Ariosh because her magic is OP. Next is strafing levels. These are similar to ground battles, only here you don't have to bother with the enemy. You can honestly just run past them without consequence. Finally, the aerial battles. These are probably the most fun and polished part of the game, in case the name didn't clue you in. In Drakengard, you get to fly around on a dragon. And yeah, it's as awesome as it sounds. Flying around an even larger map with enemies coming at you is a lot of fun, even when the lock-on gets a little finicky with small enemies like these bat things. When you lock onto an enemy, you proceed to dogfight them while all the others try to kill you. When you feel overwhelmed by the large number of enemies attacking you, you can use a magic spell if you have all of the green bars charged, and it will wipe out like 30 enemies for you. Suffice to say, aerial battles are the best part of this game. Music is a key component of Yoko Taro's games, and Drakengard is no different. The music doesn't just set up the atmosphere, it bolsters it, and that's exactly how it's done. For the most part. Not every track here is a winner. Throughout a decent chunk of levels, when the music popped on, all I could think was, oh, this fits. However, when the right track does come on, you'll know instantly how unique this game's OST is. How right at the start, at the very first cutscene, the music is so haunting and epic as the battle plays out. It'll stick in your mind for the next several days. So while the tracks can be hit or miss, they ultimately help make the game more tolerable. Finally, let's talk not only about the game's replayability factor, but the infamous ending. Now, there will be spoilers for a 20-year-old game, but if you don't want to hear or see it, I recommend skipping ahead maybe 5 minutes. Anyways, let's start with the ending. There are a total of 5 endings in Drakengard, 4 of which can be unlocked by just continuing to play the game after each credit scene. The 5th one, however, is, in all honesty, a massive pain in the ass. In order to unlock this ending, you not only need to get every other ending, but you need to be in possession of every weapon in the game, and there are an abundance of them. And I'm not talking about maybe 20 or 30 of them, no. There are a total of 65 weapons in the game, 64 of which you need to get, and each of them have a different unlock requirement. Without a guide, this would probably take you about 70 hours of trial and error. I understand how awesome Ending E is. It was a true surprise for those who really stuck with 100% completion. But believe me, it's not worth it. You've got to remember this is an old game, and a lot of old games didn't value your time. Segueing into replayability, we already know that in order to get Ending E, you have to replay the game dozens upon dozens of times to get each weapon. Unlike a lot of other games though, each weapon has a story. As much as it was a chore to get each one, the short little stories each weapon contained was interesting, but honestly, you would be better off looking them up. Now, getting each weapon and completing Ending E grants you access to one last stage, and it is the best stage of the game. An aerial mission that has you dogfighting jets. That's right, it's time to get back at the jets that murdered you with a good old-fashioned dogfight. This is undoubtedly the hardest aerial mission you'll play, but if you manage to take them all down, you will unlock a jet for you to pilot on other aerial missions. Funny enough though, Kai, the main character, rides a jet like he would a cat, like he would a dragon. So I guess the real question is, who's flying the jet? Overall, the game has a fantastic story that is incredibly dark and still pretty unique today. Each character brought something to the table, and they weaved into the scenes perfectly. The music is haunting and fit each level and cutscene. Gameplay, however, is pretty tedious and ends up becoming stale after the first hour and a half. Despite finding the aerial missions to be the best part of the game, after the 5th or 6th time doing the exact same thing with a slightly different objective, I was over it. Not to mention how long each level takes. Seriously, unless you are at an incredibly high level with the max level weapons, each level could take roughly half an hour to beat. I wish I could say that this game had good replayability, but it doesn't. So, to be honest, is Drakengard worth playing today? No. Just no. I'm a huge fan of the Taraverse, but the only things worth experiencing is the story and music. If you are a fan of Nier and want to know more about its origins, I implore you to go onto the Drakengard wiki and read about it. Just don't sink so many hours into a boring, tedious game that doesn't really reward you for your time and effort. Well, my first ever no on it, to be honest, and it comes from a series that I love. Funny how that works. Regardless, it's how I feel after playing through it myself. Now, before I flop back onto a bed and just sleep off the sickness, I have one other announcement to make. Today, after this video releases, I will be uploading a compilation of all of Drakengard's cutscenes on this channel, upscaled to 4K to look nice and more modern on a 4K television. If you want to experience the crazy world of Drakengard, please give it a watch. It should be releasing roughly 10 minutes after this releases, or perhaps 30 minutes. I can't tell anymore. Anyways, happy 20th anniversary, Drakengard. Oh, and one last question. Do the watches have too?